12th of the year. How about that?
Well,
That's what I would point out. We haven't hit our first official item of the agenda tonight either.
And that is correct. And I think
well, do we need another meeting to make that decision?
we're still in a work meeting.
I think maybe, Mayor, you could summarize what you've heard. From what I'm hearing, it's kind of all the same.
Let's move. Let's do it. Let's get an architect and go forward.
And we've already had some preliminary discussion.
Can you turn your mic on?
Well,
I could, yeah, that'd be a good idea. I think why don't you try summarizing what you've heard, and if we all feel that's right, then we can just say,
Make
work
it
on
so.
this.
well, in summary, we have a different design that has been proposed other than what was submitted by CRSA Architects that would be a lot more economical. And so it sounds to me like council would like to move ahead with something similar to that design with an RFP to get out ASAP. Is that pretty much what everybody's thinking here?
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm seeing 7 heads agreeing. Thank you.
Okay, so there's no need to have it on, let's get the RFP out.
6 agreeing, 1 apathetic.
If they can have proposals back in time for the strategic planning.
Well, you're ambitious.
If we're doing our groundbreaking in March,
Yeah, good luck with that.
And make sure they sign the payment, technical.
Okay, we know where we're going with that, correct?
Corbin's not comfortable as much as I am. I will tell you that clarification as to whether I want you a theater, a cultural center, or a black box, all in one building. And you can't have all 3.
I would suggest I guess the question is, what sort of facility can we get with the funds that have been allocated, with the emphasis on the arts community and meeting some of the needs that have been brought up there. If the response is we can do black box but we can't do the proscenium theater, okay, so be it. There have been other proposals that have already been brought. If those seem reasonable, I think there was like $3 or $4 million proposal was estimated. Would like to know if that's doable. If not, why not? But what can we do with the funding that's been?
Unfortunately, Corbin's had some experience with the Hale Center Theater, so.
If I may be so bold, I'm totally confused on this. It feels to me like the building is the end, not the service we're trying to provide is the end. And I don't, what I'm saying is, what I don't know from you is what service, what need are we trying to provide in the community, and where's the pro forma to meet that need long-term? Who's paying for, once the building's built, that's the easy part.
Let me interrupt you right here. We are in a work study meeting, right? So we have a lot of more latitude and with things. So I'm going to invite Dave Newton to come up, and he, for lack of better terms, I guess, could be representing an element of the Arts Council group. So Dave, could you help us as a council member in Corbin? What is it that you're looking for that would fit with our budget?
Hang on. I think what you're asking, Corbin, is what do we see this building? What is the purpose of this building? Why do we want this building in our community? And I think the purpose that we want is to bring the arts into our community. We want a place for plays to be performed, or the mom that has the dance studio in her basement to be able to rent it out and use it for her performances. We want a place that can be kind of a multi-purpose, but definitely needs to have a place that performing arts can use and bring culture into our city. And that so that includes the symphonies and bands.
So that's what I'm looking for, is this kind of this document or this direction from the council on, these are the uses we feel like are missing in our community that we want to provide through this facility. A.
And those
B,
are the things.
And then here's
probably
here's who's going to bear the ongoing cost of those uses and how much we expect the pro forma that goes with it. And then we know how to design and program a building to meet those uses and to meet that pro forma. That's the part that I feel like is missing.
Okay, cool.
So back in March of 2017, Method Studios completed a study and presented to the council a feasibility study for a cultural arts facility. And they did that exact thing. We sat down as a council and we included the arts groups and conversations and said, okay, what are the things that are most important to us, and ranked those elements, and then came together with a rough concept. They provided us a concept saying, we said $8 million. How many of these items on our checklist are you able to accommodate? And they put together this feasibility study with sort of a rough outline. So I just forwarded that email to you. I CC'd Bricky and I CC'd the council the whole, because March 2017, not everybody was here. But that kind of gives the background as to what we were looking for, and it goes into more detail as to what Councilmember Whitelock was saying. From there was a fair amount of scope creep, and things got a little bit bigger. Well, what if we enlarged the room for rehearsal, and what if we did this with the storage area, and we should probably adjust the ceiling this way, and now ventilation's got to be bigger, so if we up the ventilation, and it just kind of expanded from the $8 million that we had originally requested to substantially more. But I think Mr. Newton has been engaged with the arts community since forever, and this project as well.
Thank you.
So he can give everything much more succinctly than.
And I'd be happy to meet with Corbin and tell him about the 4 or 5 times we've done this, Corbin, and we're still not there, but we've got good ideas of what is needed, and I drew up a basic rough idea of what we could do and for what money, and how to do it in a manner that would be efficient and would give us most of what we need for these programs. And so I'd be happy to sit down with you and show you what we've done before. But we've had numerous meetings with the Arts Council, with the public in general, with the different groups within the previous Arts Council, and we have a pretty good idea of what's needed, the space that's needed, and the usage that would be there. And I think we've gone through it with the council on 2 or 3 different occasions, and we've got a pretty good idea of what we need. Okay.
If I could add, I know Corbin is relatively new, but a little
More
bit
than relatively, I'm brand new.
So a little bit of background. Mr. Newton has been engaged in the arts community, like I said, well over 20 years. He served on the city council. He has served as mayor. He worked with them to set aside a fair amount of funding for an arts facility. He was very engaged when we were over at the sugar factory, and then when that came down, he's been involved as accommodations have been made to host performances in the Bowery out behind City Hall, downstairs in the community room as we look over at Midvale. He's been engaged as we acquired the old library across the street and had originally drawn up, worked with an architect to draw up some conceptual sketches for how that building could potentially be transformed into something that would meet, obviously not all of the needs, and it wouldn't be a perfect solution, but it would be a fiscally responsible solution to engage this element of the community that's been working for a couple decades now to provide arts to the members of the city. So he's one of the best resources in this room to get all of that information. So if I could give direction, even though Mr. Newton is not a member of city staff or council, it would be that staff engage with him to look at what's already been done and what the request is, because he's been engaged from all aspects for many years now.
So if it's okay, how I'll proceed from here, I think, is review what you just sent, meet with Mayor Newton, former Mayor Newton, and then if I feel like if at that point, one thing I'm sensing very clearly from all of you is that we need to get going on this. We're tired of waiting. We're tired of spinning our wheels. Time to move on. What I want to make sure you have is that you know not only the price to construct, what exactly you're going to get for that, and what services it will provide or benefit for the community, and the ongoing cost to the city, and who's going to bear that cost, whether it's the city, the arts groups, who and what portion. Before we break ground, I want to make sure we have a very clear idea of particularly the ongoing cost. That's one thing that makes me nervous about this, is that the ongoing costs for these types of projects are not insignificant. So let's make sure we're going into that with some expectations set right up
And
front.
the expectation that was set when we originally engaged the architect for the concept was $50,000 a year was the anticipated amount that would be required of the city for O&M and to set aside for fixture replacement. We're not looking for anything substantial, certainly not like a health center theater, not the mechanics, not the level of finishings inside the building, but a true community room. Again, taking this not from the approach of health center theater, but this is a group that has happily performed in the Bowery out in the park and can really literally make do with anything.
Yeah, let's update those and.
I would think, given the conversation over the next couple of weeks, if there's time to meet, it would probably make sense to keep this as a topic for strategic planning.
It needs to
We
be.
have a meeting on the 23rd, so.
And one thing I want to reiterate, and I'm sure former Mayor Newton will agree with me, this isn't just being built so we can have plays in the city. This building's going to be used for many things.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we want it to be. And it's always been the idea that it's a community center and an opportunity for many groups to use, and including those that have performed for 20 years. And we have a base there that is extremely talented and extremely good, and we've involved so many people. And that is of great value to the city as a community, and that's what we wanted to make sure that we build and continue to grow. And I'm just afraid if we don't move, we're going to lose that base that we've got, and I don't want to do that.
Well, we're all getting older.
By the
One
minute.
of the things that has been a concern to me as I've watched this in the city over the last number of years is, for instance, we'd add a park, to Corbin's comment, and we wouldn't add any people or equipment to take care of that park. Somehow, we'd figure out how to make it happen. We don't want this to happen with the building. If we're going to have a building, we've got to figure out how we're going to take care of that building throughout the life of that building. So that's right now, we start with $50,000 and see if that's going to make it. And obviously, a performance got to be made to see how we're going to use that building, what's going to happen. There's a lot of things that have got to happen the biggest thing we're looking for right now is let's get the dang thing in the ground.
Thank you.
Let's get it going, because it's,
Agreed.
Dave knows, we've been involved with this a long, long, long time. And it's time to move ahead. So, Corbin, do you have what you need on that, I guess, at this point?
I'm sure I'll be asking a lot more questions, but yes, I have enough to move forward. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Workshop item 2D, discussion regarding pinpointing a business license fee structure to take action on when addressing agenda item 11A during the regular city council meeting. Corbin.
If I may, Mayor, work session item 2D, I propose that we just consider that one and the same with the regular agenda item at this time.
Okay. We can do that. So, I will close the workshop meeting and come back to return to the city council meeting. And so, we are on communications. Right up there.
Mayor, I would move that we combine communications with remarks at the end.
Or we could even eliminate them if nobody's got anything specific they want to say.
I'll still have remarks, but.
Okay, we'll move it to remarks at the end. So help me remember to do that at the end. Let's see. So we're on item 10A.
Consent.
Did we miss? Oh, I missed consent. Sorry. We are consent calendar, item 9. Councilmember McConaughey.
No mention, has any mention been made of items to withhold?
want to pull an item?
I would move to approve all consent items except F as in Foxtrot.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent items, with all except F, as in Frank. Foxtrot. Ferry, whatever. Follow. Discussion of the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton,
Aye.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Vote passes 7-0.
Okay, item 9F, approve resolution 19-06, authorizing the mayor to execute a purchase of real property contract between Lynn Rasband and June Christiansen and the city of West Jordan related to the 7000 South, 6400 West intersection improvement. Scott's name's on there, but Councilmember Jacob pulled it, so we'll ask him to address that.
Yeah, about, a month and a half ago, I had a meeting with Scott and a couple folks from traffic. Brian, I think, was there as well. And we were talking about these roundabouts on 7800 South that were partially constructed, and there's more than one, this is one of them, partially constructed without having the approval of the council on an arterial street roundabout, which is an ordinance that we passed a little while back. This one and the one just east of this one were specifically mentioned as, partially constructed. After we had voted on that ordinance, and I guess there was some ambiguity as to where construction starts. I figured it was shovel turning. Staff had figured that it was as long as plans have been submitted or something along those lines. So at the end of that meeting, the action item was, well, we need to bring these two roundabouts then to the council. And were you in that meeting? I don't remember if you were in that meeting or not. Yeah, you came late, yeah. So that was at the end of the meeting, that was the decision, right? We need to bring these two roundabouts to the council for approval so that we can move forward on them. Here we are moving forward on them, that still hasn't happened, so I turn it over to staff for your thoughts going forward.
Absolutely, thank you for that background. The plan right now is to bring back that roundabout discussion in February. Nate Nelson and Bill Baranowski are working on getting a formal report ready for the council as a business item. The item before you tonight does not dictate whether a roundabout goes there or a regular intersection. It would accommodate for both. In as much as we have right of way on all the other corners of this intersection, this would just complete it, round it out.
Okay, so I guess that leads to my question, do we need this if it's not a roundabout?
Yes,
We need it if it's a light or a two-way stop sign or whatever else?
we will need it, yes.
Okay. All right, that's my question. I don't know if anybody else has questions.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo Councilmember Jacobs. The reason that I proposed that I requested that we change the ordinance so that roundabouts on arterial streets would come before the council is so that we can kind of manage the look of the city. Does not have anything to do with engineering. There was a misunderstanding from the original motion, which said, it was like, I think June a year ago, so 18 months ago. The original motion, or I'm sorry, the documentation in the staff report was that any project that was kind of in process by October 1st, we amended that and made it effective the date we passed it. And these came in between, that fell into that gap, misunderstanding-wise. I'm still not a huge fan of roundabouts on arterial streets, just unless we make them bigger. They're too small. So for me, I want it on a case-by-case basis on an arterial. So anyway, that's my comment. But that kind of explains ad dovetailing into what Councilmember Jacob said about where some of the confusion came in, the motion that passed made it effective when we passed that motion, not at a future date. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
I was just gonna ask if, given the questions being answered, if there was a motion, but I will back away so that can be done.
Make the motion. I was just gonna make the motion, so. I move to approve resolution 19-06, approving or authorizing the mayor to execute a purchase of real property contract between Lynn Rasband, June Christensen, and the city of West Jordan, with the express note that this is not approved a roundabout at that location.
Councilmember Anderson.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Vote passes 7-0.
Okay, now our public hearing, item 10A, receive public comment only regarding a rezone of 1.641 acres located at approximately 5701 West, 7800 South, from SC-2 Community Shopping Center Zone to M-1 Light Manufacturing Zone. Think Storage LLC, Warren Kirk applicant, Larry Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll be brief. There's 3 council members that were not here, and probably 3/4 of the staff that when this was approved in 2017. It was an original 8-acre site, and its location is on 7800 South and on Mountain View Corridor. It's just east of Mountain View Corridor. As you recall, there is 2 major transmission lines on the east side of it, one being a transmission line for Rocky Mountain Power and the other being a high-pressure gas line facility that is owned by, I believe, Kern River or Dominion Energy. It doesn't matter, one of the other. At that time, when the applicant proposed to rezone this to M1, that was the zone that we allowed storage units in. The applicant, Think Storage, would like to build a storage unit project similar to the one they've constructed in South Jordan next to the Costco on 104th South. At that time, they only rezoned about 6.4 acres to M1. That was adequate for their needs. They wanted to reserve this 1.6 acre site in a SC1 commercial, feeling that it would have commercial potential. At that time, there was a proposed inlet into this site at about this location, maybe 200 feet, 200-300 feet off of the off-ramp of Mountain View Corridor. However, it was amended by the powers that be that it had to come back to this point and align with the one access point that will be coming to Think Storage and this commercial site, which would make it a long, long drive to get to this commercial site. So at this time, the applicant feels that the commercial, or at least retail commercial viability of this site has been severely hampered, and that what they're proposing is to rezone the 1.6 acres to M1 in order to build a storage unit project on the entire 8 acres and not just the 6.4 acres. Mayor, with your permission, Paul Stringham, who's one of the applicants, would like to say a few words to the council, if that's all right with you.
That would be appropriate.
Mayor, City Council, nice to be with you this evening. Thank you. I'll be succinct with this. We did feel at one time that this commercial piece of approximately 1.6 acres or this piece of property would be viable for commercial, and I know that was the direction of the city council, that you wanted more commercial there. So we consented to that as long as the condition is that we could get a right in, right out to that approach. This approach that we had there, that we've been working with Bill Baranowski and staff, was 532 feet from the Mountain View corridor. Bill thought that that was sufficient room to put this right in, right out. So that was the condition. Bill nodded his head, and I'm not trying to, Bill was here, I'd say the same thing, but Bill thought that that would be appropriate. Well, time went on, and we did zone it to the SC2 zone, or kept it to that commercial zone. But then the right in, right out was taken back. And so the city and staff says, well, really, to get to your commercial, you'll need to go further east, another 275 feet, cut into the storage project, and then go west to reach your commercial. I've been in this business for 35 years. We've got 42 commercial pads at the intersection of 5600 West and 7800 South with Peterson's there. I don't want to build, nor does the city want us to build a structure there that does not lease. It's at the gateway here of West Jordan. We want to build a very nice storage facility, and at some point in the future, we'll show you the elevations. It's unlike what you've seen here in West Jordan City in the past. And so as a result of this, we want to go back to the M1 zone to accommodate the storage. We just feel like this is the best use for this piece of property right there. I could say other things, but for the sake of time, I think I've made my point.
Are there any questions for staff or the applicant?
I just wanted to make a comment, if I may. They have been very good. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
They've been very good to work with, and they've accommodated our requests and needs. When we talked about this, we spent a lot of time and hours on this in the past and working this out. And so thank you for being flexible and continue to work with us and listen to us and coming and showing this with us today.
Thank you. Seeing no more comments, I'll open up the public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come to the lectern. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and come back to council for comments or motion. Councilmember Burton. Councilmember McConaughey.
Oh, there's no motion, it's comment only. No, the comment, thank you, Mayor. The comment I was going to make is that I think this is similar to what I said before when this first came up, but 78th and Mountain View corridor, this is one of our few freeway interchanges, and there's so much potential, and with the power corridor, it's stuck at potential, and even that has a question mark next to it. I wish that there was a better use for the property that could be applied. However, I think this is probably the best that can be done given the constraints on the property. M1, especially when the plan of storage is certainly not the first option the city wants to turn to. But for these few locations where options are limited, you have an odd-shaped parcel, you have limited access, and I kind of made a side comment to Councilmember Burton that it seems like places of our city do specialize in unrentable retail. We don't want to do that here. So I appreciate the applicant coming, sharing thoughts, working with staff and council, and trying to get the best product possible. I'll also express appreciation for projects that have been done in the past. And the quality and caliber, I think, is there. So the one thought that I would have, and I know Mr. Langford, I've asked for this on others, where there was a potential that ownership could potentially change at some point in the project. If there's some way when this comes back to have it structured that there is a time frame set on it, or if there's a transfer of ownership, the zoning reverts. I would be interested in seeing something like that. so that we're sure we get what we're expecting.
If that was the wish of the council, you'd have to make that known in your motion that there's a time frame. Otherwise, we're just kind of shooting in the dark.
And since there is no motion proposed for tonight, this is hearing the input. When this does appear on the agenda for action, I guess my question then would be to council, would there be support to include an option that allows a timing limit or an ownership limit with the change in the zoning? I'm seeing two nodding.
I would ask for a comment from Scott on that.
We can certainly propose a couple different options. We'll work with the city attorney and his staff, but that's certainly doable. Where I would feel uncomfortable is if there were special conditions of approval above and beyond what's allowed in the M1. But if we're just talking about time frame, I think that's doable. Correct?
Well, time frame and ownership.
Generally, yes. Let me just throw out one thing that we're actually having a bit of a discussion with. There's a group called the Land Use Task Force Negotiating Team, and that's where a group of developers and a group of city attorneys meet regularly, and we wrestle with these issues. And one of the issues we're wrestling with right now that is in a bill that we're trying to come to consensus on is this reversion idea that you've talked about. And in the past, I've been involved in negotiating a number of development agreements where there is an express reversion, that if the development doesn't proceed as the council approved it at that time, within a certain time frame, it reverts back to the original zone because things change over time. And that's a concept that the city position feels pretty strongly about, and so do most developers. But there are circumstances that come up where, for sometimes circumstances outside the control of even a landowner, they can't develop in the time that they're projecting. And so that's where we're kind of at a loggerhead. But as of right now, generally, we can impose those types of things through the appropriate mechanism.
Yeah. We have done that in the past on a couple of items. And I think those other items had a development plan. We required the development plan to be submitted with the zoning change and had the two in conjunction. I'd rather not require both of those at this juncture, rather just the simplification of the zoning change with reversion of property ownership or to change. But
we'll look at that.
To figure out the best approach.
Yeah, we'll look at that. The challenge is there's a prohibition both in the Utah, been in federal and state courts in interpreting federal and state constitutions that you can't conditionally zone property. You can't treat one owner of that property that has that zone differently than the owner of property in another of the same zones in another location. But there's ways around that if we structure it right.
And I think that's why previously we required the plan, because if the plan changed with the ownership, then we could revisit the zoning. But I'll look forward to whatever proposal is brought to meet the concern. Or if it's something that could just be done with time frame.
We'll work with Mr. Stringham and make sure that we coordinate with him.
Okay. Any more discussion regarding 10A? Councilmember Anderson.
I just kind of want to echo, I struggle that the corner of 78th and Mountain View Corridor is going to be storage units. I don't know the easy solution, but I'm just struggling with that. So that's all. I just wanted to vocalize that here we have an opportunity to do something exciting, I think. And when Mountain View becomes a freeway, that parcel will probably become much more valuable. So I could see a potential that a storage facility may be a short term. I don't know what that is. I'm just disheartened that coming in off Mountain View Corridor and 78 South, you have a storage unit instead of some shops. So, thanks, Mayor.
May I address that question, or am I able to talk? Because I think that's a great question.
Not yet.
Okay.
Councilmember Burton.
May I address that question? We did discuss this a lot, and right now we have native grass growing there, and this will be much better than native grass. Second of all, if we, you don't think this will look better than native grass? Oh, I thought you said no. If
The characterization of weeds is native, the politically appropriate native grass.
Moving right along.
The second thing is, we were concerned about what goes there, and that's why I'm pleased that it's Peterson doing this, and they've agreed to put it in something that'll look good, albeit storage units, but they can make some storage units look good. But that will look a whole lot better than some retail stuck in there that's vacant. What we've seen on 70th is bad. If you take a look at some places like State Street and I-80, where you get off right there, immediately on the right-hand side, there was this blinds place for a few years, and getting access to that was extremely difficult, and those make it hard for those businesses. And I'm just concerned that if we force a business there, and if they eventually do come and our native grass is gone, that we have an empty building, which I think would look worse than having a storage unit there. And if you go look at that property there, you see those power lines there, and you see what that looks like, and we're not going to be able to move those, I think this is a good alternative.
No, and
Councilmember Anderson.
sorry, thank you, Mayor. And I'm not disagreeing, and Peterson does a great job. That's not my concern. As you look at the map on the right, there's a lot of vacant space there, and I'm not necessarily suggesting retail. Could it be a corporate center? Could it be a school site, higher ed school site? Could it be data centers? The possibilities are, in my view, endless. And there's a part of me that thinks that maybe native grass is okay for the time being while we find what that might be. And I know that that's bundling a bunch of property together to make something like that happen, but I don't want to be thinking on a micro level. I want to look at the grander level. There's a whole lot that can be, in my view, there's a whole lot that could be thought of there besides what's being considered. That's all I'm trying to say. And Peterson does a great job. I'm not questioning how it will look. I'm not questioning any of that. It's merely the time, manner, place, location. That's really the only thing that I'm struggling with. Doesn't mean maybe I will approve it. I don't know, but that's what I'm struggling with. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I want to go back to the applicant now, because everybody's cleared off except more people have come on. So I want to come back and have you address what you were going to.
Okay, Alan, it's a great question you bring up there, though, on storage. I've developed more retail in my life than I have storage, though our storage has been successful. I, too, would go with you, Alan, if we could have a successful retail project there. You've got 38 acres directly across the street that is going to be very, very challenging to lease and to construct with commercial there. I just sense that from my experience, okay? I am the commercial guy for Peterson of all the commercial that they do at this intersection at 56, as I did up there near Costco and that intersection too. But here at 56 and 78, we've worked with hospitals or hospital and other larger commercial uses. I have tried over the years to try to locate larger uses for this area without success. And the reason for that is because of the power corridor, the irregular shape, the depth of the piece, it's inefficient ground to really develop on. And yes, you do have visibility. And for any successful project, you need visibility. And you need also access. And you need synergy, particularly for retail commercial here. Here, this piece, you've got visibility, but when you have to go east another 200, or you have to go east another 250, 70 feet or so from the building, and then cut back into from a storage project that is really more of a sleepy, quiet project to go into what you try to find some synergy into one building there. It just isn't there. You just don't have it. There's just too much risk to put, $700,000 into the ground, $800,000 in the ground, then another 1.2, 1.3 million into a building. And when you've got 42 other pads there where you do have more synergy at 56, that's where the activity is with commercial right now and will be for the future. I'm confident of that, absolutely confident of that with what's going on in the past and what is going on the northeast corner, which we're platting here in the next 30 days, I think. And then with the commercial there to the north of us, if that takes off, and I'm hopeful that it does, I really am. They'll make it happen somehow, but it's going to take a long period of time. That's too where will be the synergy. But this little piece right here for 1.5 acres for one building of which it would hold there is going to be really difficult, and the risk is too great to develop for a developer, I think, to do it. And I don't want the city, nor do I want to have a vacant building there and having it just revolving back and forth. That's my thoughts. You need synergy for retail and commercial to work. You don't get it off a storage project. And if this could work for commercial, successful retail commercial, I'd be doing it too. I really would. But it's irregular, it's deep, it's a difficult piece by the corridor, power corridor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you.
Just a clarifying question. The other 8 or so acres have already been approved for storage unit use, right? We're just talking
Approximately
less
6.5.
than 2.
The 8 acres, yeah, the 8 acres includes the
Okay.
commercial piece
But
there.
that's already a done deal, pretty much.
Yes, that has been zoned.
Okay.
And we're now looking to, yeah.
To do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
to go back to that.
Any further discussion on?
If we, again, I'll just say, if we had the access point there in front of the commercial, I'd say, yeah, let's go. But that was the condition up front, but it was pulled back and said, we can't let you have it. So the retail becomes very, very challenging.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, we'll move to item 10B, which is continue until January 23rd. A motion is required on this item. Someone like to make a motion for that?
Mayor,
Scott,
sorry
yes?
to interrupt. Did you open the last item up for public hearing?
Yes.
It
Oh.
was?
Yes, we did. Nobody came.
Okay. All right, sorry.
Councilmember Lamb.
I'd like to make a motion for public hearing number 10A to continue until January 23rd.
10B?
10B, 10A is over. 10B to continue until January 23rd, 2019.
And I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion.
I just have
Councilmember Burton.
Mayor, I just have a question. Why?
Because it's on the agenda and somebody requested it.
I know, but why are we postponing it, I guess is my question.
Ask Jared Tingy, is he here? Jared, can you answer that?
Yeah, so it was scheduled for tonight. We had planned on having the contract in front of you, but after some discussion with Jen Campbell, who's involved with SVS or South Valley Sanctuary, we decided to postpone it to January 23rd to just make sure that all the loose ends were tied, so, in the contract.
So they are aware and prepared for this to be postponed?
Yes, yes, yep.
Thank you.
Council, I can clarify, there were some terms that they did not like in the agreement. They met with myself and Jared, and we worked out the differences, so what you're getting is something that they actually like. This one, last agreement, they had some concerns that the timelines were too short for them to accommodate moving or relocating if that's what the council ever asked of them. So I've agreed to extend out some time periods to help them out.
Okay, seeing no more, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
and Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Vote passes 7-0.
Business item 11A. Discussion and possible action regarding ordinance 19-01, amending and adopting the City of West Jordan business license fees as set forth herein, and authorizing staff to update the consolidated schedule of fees and service charges. And we'll go to Corbin on this one.
Brock,
Actually, Mayor, thank you, Mayor and Council. I think I'm gonna start this. You received the ordinance and the staff report, and a copy of a comparison of business license scenarios for the fiscal year 20. This will need, if we're going to make a change in business licensing fees, it will need to be made and approved by council this month, so we will have time in order to adopt it and integrate it into the 2020 or the 1920 fiscal year come July 1. So you've received that with the current business license fees in 3 scenarios. We're here to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Burton.
Didn't we discuss this in our last council meeting and have a vote on this?
Yes, and it failed. This is a new,
So this is a totally different ordinance?
Change the paper.
So we can bring it back and do it again like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. As was mentioned earlier, there was a portion that was going to be discussed in the workshop. I would just ask if you're comfortable modifying the rules of engagement during this portion so that we can have all the mics, so that we can perhaps have our comments a little more expeditiously. Or there was the other thought that you had mentioned too. But just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, and we'll see where that goes. After the motion's made, if there's a second, then we can discuss that motion and vote on that one. If that fails, we'll make another motion, and we'll keep working on this until we can get it resolved tonight. So I move to adopt ordinance number 19-01, amending and adopting the City of West Jordan business license fees as set forth in scenario A herein, and authorizing staff to update the consolidated schedule of fees and service charges in accordance with this ordinance. Is there a second? Councilmember Anderson?
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion by Mayor Riding and a second by Councilmember Anderson. So now discussion to the motion. Councilmember Anderson.
Just a question for Mr. Wall, since I don't see Mr. Bricky. Rob? Okay. So if the motion failed last time, and we hear a similar motion, or if not an identical motion, is that permissible?
Well, the rules are if somebody voted in the negative last time, and they can bring the same matter up again. So if this is identical, it's not the same, if it's a new motion, if it's a new item, you can consider it. But if it's revisiting the old item, then you have to have 2 votes who voted on the prevailing side last time.
But if it didn't pass, then you could hear it again.
Yes. That's a new item.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. In the past, the council's taken the opinion that if nothing passed, it could be brought back. If something had been passed, to change it would require the reconsideration. But if nothing had been passed, then even without a change, in the past we brought it back again. And the reconsideration rule, I believe, I'd have to dig through our council rules and procedures. Actually, I think this one may be city code. I think that primarily pertains to land use decisions, where it has to be brought back within a certain amount of time for reconsideration. But for things like this, I don't believe there's anything in our council rules that prohibits us from hearing in a subsequent meeting the same motion that did not pass in a prior meeting. That nothing to back that up with me right away, but that's just going off of prior experience from the last 7+ years. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
I was just going to mention, we've reconsidered lots of things that are not land use decisions that may or may not have passed. Sewer fees for one, case in point. So as, I would think if it's identical, we would want to do a motion to reconsider and have a 2/3 vote in order to reconsider. But since we're already got a motion on the table, No surprise, I'm opposed to it, but you knew that.
Councilmember Anderson.
Sorry, I'm jumping in again. So it's scenario A that we're looking at. And I think I asked Brock earlier, I think it was today or yesterday, because as I noticed some of the other cities, Murray that I looked at, West Valley that I looked at, Taylorsville that I looked at, Sandy, I think, they're all fairly similar, but they don't have it as broad as we do. They've limited, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So there's like 24 categories that Murray has. Now, interestingly, I found out that Murray charges a $10 disproportionate fee per company-owned vehicle, which I haven't seen any other city do. And I think you had answered me, but maybe for the benefit of the council, kind of how did we get to do all the categories and some of the other cities do less categories?
In looking at theirs, and Rob may want to correct me, but in looking at theirs, they are charging a regulatory fee by business class. They are just choosing which classes to charge, as best I could tell, without actually looking at their study and looking at their policies. So they are sticking with state law. They are charging all by business classification. They're just choosing the classification in which to charge, is what I could see. Now, I don't know their philosophies on it for sure to say if for a fact that's what they are doing. That's just what it appeared to me.
Okay, thank you. And then while I have the mic, I just had a question for Chief Wallentine. When I rode with the police, we went from call to call to call. Sometimes we went to businesses, we went to a couple residences, but how often are our police responding to business calls? Is there a peak time? Are we delaying service to residents because all of our officers are out of business? Or do you have some ideas on that?
I do, Councilmember. Let me answer the easy question first, and that is yes, there are times that we delay response, and sometimes we just flat out defer response. That's a fancy way for saying we don't respond to a resident, to a home, because of a business call. And that's the reasons underlying that are fairly complex. I'd be happy to give you a synopsis if you'd like.
Tonight, or, I mean, email it, or?
Well, it's I recently asked our analysts to give me some information about, what are the hot zones in the city? And you heard earlier tonight in the State of the City address about the numbers of calls for service, which I've mentioned before is not always the best indicator of how busy a police agency is. There are valleys and troughs, and frankly, right at this moment, we are at the bottom of a climbing trough, and that just is what it is. And some people are saying, well, why is that? And there's what's called a dark theory of policing, that citizens call police less frequently over the last decade for two major contributing factors. Lack of trust in a particular community. I do not believe that's present in this community at all. And secondly, because they've had prior frustration with delays. In other words, they don't think that their call is sufficiently serious to get a police officer to the scene. As I've looked at the hot zones in the city, or at least the top 20 that account for a number of our calls, they break down into three groups: 7, 7, and 4. 7 of the hot zones, well, they are residents, sort of, because they're larger multi-unit complexes. There are larger apartment and not so much condominium complexes, and it would not surprise you, I think, that as I've looked at the addresses to see that some of those are Section 8 or those type of housing complexes. 7 of them, 7 of those clusters are standalone
retail centers. Now, that may be a large, big box store all on its own, and the parking area associated with it, or some of them are clusters. And then we have four location clusters built around intersections, which, again, they won't surprise you. 90th South and Redwood, 78th South and Redwood, 7800 South and Redwood, and this one may surprise you, 90th South and Bangor, which, you know, what's there, yeah, a hospital, and then there's been a lot of construction over the past period of time, and you say, well, why then do those, why is it that those clusters are taking more time that diverts police resources from a delayed burglary call or a broken car window? And there are a number of reasons for that. That is because primarily there are distinctive patterns in police responses to business locations. They are almost always multiple officer calls. Now, I can tell you we have one big, out there at Jordan Landing, there are a few big parking lots, and there are a couple of those parking lots that amazingly we seem to have fender benders in the parking lots and ingress and egress crashes on the main access roads. Those often are just single, unless there's an injury, single officer calls. But the rest of them are calls such as shoplifting. You know, when I started in police work, when your father was in police work, we'd send one cop to a shoplifter. We don't do that anymore because many of them end up in some kind of a confrontation, and we want to avoid the force, and having more officers avoids force. Not to be dramatic, but a police officer was killed at a shopping center last week. There 4 officers responded to that call. There should have been 8 officers on that call based on the nature and character of what the reporting parties said. But only 4 officers were available. Now, I'm not going to try and analyze what happened, but there are calls at businesses that we simply send more officers to, not just the shoplifting, but many of those calls result in a trip to the county jail. That consumes an enormous amount of time, particularly if it's a busy time in the county jail and there's a waiting line. You wait in line sometimes at the county jail to get in, because we're dealing with people who don't have, it's not like going to a home where I know that you live here, you have an interest in this real estate, you're going to be here for a while, and I may well, because of the circumstances, I may use some discretion and issue you a citation or screen charges later, because I know where to come back and find you, and I can follow up. But if I'm dealing with a shoplifter who's fought someone at a business, that person, per force, needs to, under how we do business, that person goes to jail. We have, the more arrests you have, the more time that consumes of police services, and that also carries implications beyond your question. That implicates the time of the judge and the clerks and the prosecutors as well. If we are dealing with fraud cases, employee thefts at the businesses, our current district attorney is very persnickety. He's very persnickety about charging these kind of crimes without video evidence. It may surprise you to know that the victims often say, well, I'm not going to give you the video. And when we ask, when I had this conversation with the business just last week, why not? Well, our attorney, who's based in Atlanta, Georgia, or New York, you pick the city that's not in our community, tells us that you have to get a subpoena. Okay, so it costs us about 2.5 hours for a subpoena in terms of staff time. All of this starts to add up, sir, and if I'm dealing with simple fraud at a business, it may be 30 hours of investigation time, and so there's all of that. And then one final reason we send multiple officers to calls in zones like this is, if I go to a home where there's, say, a domestic violence, typically we want to send at least, we will not go alone. We will send at least 2 officers to domestic violence. That's where cops get killed primarily. And to be fair, that's where many murder victims originate in domestic violence. We'll send at least 2 officers and try to get a supervisor there as well. If I'm responding to a fight in progress at a large commercial establishment in a parking lot, I have a perimeter and a periphery and hundreds of potential ancillary victims or ancillary agitators or combatants. So all of those factors are very different. If I'm in a home, I separate people, but at least it's contained in a cocoon and it's encapsulated. I don't have that in a commercial zone. If I have intoxicated people in a home, again, I can contain them. If I'm responding to a place where alcohol is the principal order of, item of order on the menu, oh my gosh, I can't send 2 officers. I don't send 2 officers into a bar anymore. I don't know that anybody has for years. So I could break that down even further for you. But statistically, the businesses, they just have a different consumption pattern, sir. It's just a different consumption pattern. So when you go call to call to call, we triage. We'll set aside a shoplifter, we'll set aside a fraud, we'll set aside a major case at a bank if we've got an emergent domestic violence call. But if we've got, my car was broken into last night and all of my, I've saved for a year to have this nice stereo, was stolen. Sometimes, I'm embarrassed to say, sometimes it's take a number, but we do ultimately try and do our best to get to them. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think I captured what you wanted to know.
Yeah, that helps me a lot in making the decisions, and I know there's been a lot of information on the pricing, but as I've looked at what the different cities charge, I feel like we're right in line and lower in some cases. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I appreciate your time, Brock, and I appreciate your time, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to say, Chief Valentine, thank you very much for being our police chief. Your answer was fantastic and on the spot. So my comment on this is, when we brought this up last time, there was a comment made about the reason this is coming up at this time is because we wanted to comply with the change in the state statute that said we can't charge a fee to home-based businesses that don't, I can't remember the word, said impact, that's right. And so we made that change immediately to comply with that. And there was another little change made in the bill that talked about this disproportionate part. And then was the chamber mentioned something about the maker of the bill, Senator Andrigg, I believe is how you pronounce his name. So I thought, well, I'll call him and ask him what his thoughts are, and I did. And he is going to be sending me an email about that, but he contends that the disproportionate fees aren't supposed to be included in that. However, the wording of the bill is, he says he's talked to our attorneys, isn't worded that way, and he says he understands our attorneys feel that the way that is worded that we can do disproportionate fees. So he is under the impression that he may need to make some more adjustments to that. So my thought is we should probably wait until we see what he is going to do or the state is going to do before we do any scenarios that add a disproportionate fee on there. So either we just hold off altogether or do a scenario where we do a base fee and a per person fee and don't do a disproportionate fee, so we don't have to change it twice until after we find out if he is going to create one on this or not. And it's just another month away, so perhaps we should just postpone this for a month or so to see what comes from that.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. There were 3 things I'm just going to ask, or just share one right now and then the other 2 depending. I really don't like the idea of using both the disproportionate fee and the per employee fee. I'm not opposed to making a change to the fee. I just don't like using both. I would prefer we do one or the other. I think the way we've been doing it with the base and the employee is probably cleaner. If Councilmember Burton, well, the disproportionate fee, let me back up. The disproportionate fee is relatively straightforward and easy to do. But if there are questions, perhaps it is easier to just remain with the base fee and the per employee. If that's something Councilmember Burton would support, I could support a motion that increase the base and also increase the per employee. The other portion of, I guess I will bring this up, question for Mr. Bricky. The funding that would be, the increase in funding that we would see from the change being proposed, how would those funds be expended? How would the funds be expended that are raised from this change in fee?
sat down with the chief and talked about that specifically under the disparity portion. We could have created as much as $800,000 and easily paid for those 5 officers. With what is suggested under scenario A and the amounts that are coming into the city from the Align building, it's about 2 officers.
So the intention is to use these funds for public safety, specifically increase in police staffing.
That's exactly what it is. The ordinance allows for everything from beautification to snow removal, but I've heard all of you say fire and police.
Thank you. I will share the third thing and just put all my cards on the table. I really don't like the idea of using both disproportionate and the employee. I really, really do not like it. From a principal perspective, when I make decisions, I like to let the principals guide, and that determines the outcome. I don't like to make decisions case by case. That said, there is a hierarchy of principles, and the most important principle to me is that everyone goes home safely. We have a need for police, and even though I disagree with the method being used to raise those fundings, I am not comfortable doing something that would not allow funding to meet the needs in our police department. I would vote in favor of the motion that's on the table, but not happily. I would prefer to vote in favor of a motion that just adjusts the base amount and the per employee amount. I really don't want to vote in favor of the motion that's on the table. But again, the idea of everybody going home from work safely is a higher priority than the calculation used to get there. So I guess my request would be perhaps removal of the motion that's on the table for one that does meet something along those lines. But again, I'm just one of 7. And like I said, I trust you to trust everyone up here that I can put all my cards on the table, let you know exactly what I'm thinking. So there you go. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So I too had a conversation with the senator, and I think something that we have to keep in mind is he's one of, I don't know how many actually, but one of many. How many? Well, 29 senators and how many? Okay, so about 100 people that get to make these decisions. And they did pass his bill last year. And when they're passing that bill, yes, they're looking mostly at the changes, but they're passing that full bill. And his bill that took out the business license allows disproportionate fees. It says it in there. So I understand what he's saying, but I also looked and he doesn't have a bill file yet. Of course, he's got a long time where he can still file a bill, but the longer he waits, the less chance he has of his bill being heard. So he can always piggyback. We know all those things that they can do. Then I also called Mr. Church, who is the league's attorney, to get his input. And he's like, well, of course you can. Here in Code 10.1203, Section 5, this is what it says. So I'm comfortable with what we're doing is legal. And I understand that some of our elected officials at the state level might have other ideas, but they have to pass that through everyone. And we've already worked on this for a long time. It's not that I would be opposed with Councilmember McConaughey's idea, except that I don't have those numbers, I don't have those scenarios for what it would look like to businesses. And when I've spoke with individual businesses, because they've contacted me, owners, because they've been upset from other things they've heard, when I've shared the data that I have, they've been understanding and they've been okay. So for me, we need the police officers. We need the protection in our city. And having worked at one of those facilities that the chief didn't bring up, that's on 90th and Bangerter, it's a care center. We called a fair amount. I called when a patient had totally lost it. And, you know, few injections and stun guns later, and the guy was still not under control. So, you know, in those cases, it takes a lot of personnel. So for me, we need to do something, and this is what's on the table. So there are a few businesses that I hope that we're still going to be looking at phasing it in, because one of the scenarios that was on here was the theaters, the AMC theaters. And when I looked at their difference, that did make me nervous. So question, I guess, are we looking at phasing in for anything, or is this just done?
No, excuse me, we are still looking at a phase-in process, yes.
Okay, and that's part of the motion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you. For one, I'm nervous about it being implied as part of the motion unless it's in the motion or in the resolution. So I would need to see that in the resolution or in the scenario. It's not in the scenario or the resolution as written, the phase-in period.
If you look at Exhibit A on the ordinance with the scenario A, the footnote at the bottom shows the phase-in.
Proposed through, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't realize that was on all three scenarios. Okay, appreciate that. I got it right here. I even turned it so I can see it the right way. No surprise, like I mentioned, I'm opposed to this. The disproportionate fee really gives me heartburn as well. I would also be able to support a motion that is a base fee plus a per employee fee and stick with the structure that we have. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We need more police officers, sure. We've needed more police officers for 5 years. You know, the 3 years that I've been on the council, 3 years that I was on the planning commission before that and paying attention to city council races and city council issues, absolutely. And when the chief got up and said, I need 5 more officers, I said, you really need 20. He goes, yeah, I kind of really do, right? We need more than 5. We give you 5 today, you're going to be back in a year asking for 5 more. We need a lot more police officers. This is how you pay for police officers. We have a $60 million general fund, plus or minus. It's actually plus, more than that. The first thing you do is you say, we need 30 million for police, and right now we have 22 million for police, and we need 30 million for police. So the first thing you do, if police officers is the number one principle that everybody gets home safely, the first thing you do is you say, we need 30 million for police, chunk. Now what falls off the bottom of the list? Then we go to that item. Actually, first you go to fire. How much do we need for fire? That'd be the next one. How much do you need for safe streets and snow removal? That'd be the next one for me. And we prioritize these, and we take the chunk off the top that we need, the whole chunk that you need for police, and you take the whole thing off the top of the budget. And you say, this is our biggest priority. Let's do this. And then the second one's our next priority. Let's fully fund that. And then when we get to the bottom and we have something that may not be as urgent, we say, okay, now is this what we need to raise taxes for? Or is this what we need to raise fees for, or some other funding source for? Because we have money for police officers. We're spending it on other things. We're spending it on us. We're spending it on you. We're spending it on Justin. Hi, Justin. It's good to see you again, by the way. We're spending it on other things that are not police officers. So what I'm saying is the money is there. Let's spend it on police officers first if that's what we need to spend it on first. It's a budget discussion. It's a principle discussion. It was precipitated by SB 54 that cut us off with home-based business license fees, but that wasn't enough to fund police officers. That's not a big enough change. If we got that SB 54 money back, we wouldn't have 5 new police officers. So we saw a need. We're looking for creative ways to fill that need, and this is the creative way that came up. Let's charge the businesses. They can afford it. But that's how you pay for police officers, is you budget for them first. And then you go to the second need and you budget for that second. And eventually you're going to get to the dog catcher or whatever's at the bottom of the list. And you say, okay, now we need to raise taxes or fees because that's what we need to fund. It's zero-based budgeting. You start with your priorities. That said, we are where we are. This is what it is. We're talking about business license fees that haven't been raised in 14 years. Let's raise the business license fees, but let's not reinvent the structure. Let's go with the same structure we have. I'd be supportive of a motion closer to scenario C or a scenario D, where your base fee is higher, your per employee fee is higher. I still like the cap. and without the disproportionate fee. I'm really not in favor of that.
Let's vote.
Mayor, may I interject something? The question came up about reconsideration, and this was put on the agenda as a new item by 3 council members, which is not uncommon in almost every city I know of. There is a unique provision in your rules here that you need to take a verbal vote that there is new information that justifies bringing this up, which, of course, you've solicited that from the police chief, but before you vote on the motion, you need to vote that it's appropriate to bring this up again. That's a condition that's very unique to this city, but it is in the rules.
Well, okay then.
And in fact, with a land use decision, there is no reconsideration. It's only in non-land use decisions.
Then we are going to hold a vote to determine. Should we retract the motion?
Yeah, I would.
Then I retract the motion.
Doesn't matter.
And we'll make a motion to rehear this item. Is that correct? Reconsider this item?
Reconsider the item. If there is not additional information that you consider, as the rule says, significant new information which warrants such reevaluation, then the rule that most cities do have is someone who voted on the prevailing side of the successful motion in the prior council meeting has to put it on the agenda and bring it up.
Okay, so then, did you want to make a motion, Chris? Or?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was in opposition originally, and that was the side that prevailed. So I would move that, let me think how to word this.
Reconsider. That's all you need to say.
Well, I'm also playing with the idea, there's one additional piece of information I'd really like to include in that reconsideration, and that was a piece I'm hoping Corbin might be able to provide, which is what the base would have to be and what the... I move that we reconsider this item, but also move to the workshop type format so we can ask additional questions and get further information and maybe a different proposal.
Councilmember Lamb?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion of that motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Mayor,
It's a motion, so.
Mayor Riding,
Yes?
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Burton,
No.
Councilmember Jacob.
No.
Vote passes 5-2.
So Councilmember McConaughey, you had a stipulation in your motion.
Yes.
So you should continue with that then.
Okay, so I wanted to, with your approval, Mayor, this was originally set as a workshop item, so to go back to that format so we can more freely converse, and if possible, to get Corbin to put up the, Mr. Lee to put up the spreadsheet that he had last time. There was some interest expressed in. She's lighting them all up. Yeah. Do we need to move to extend the meeting beyond that? No, sorry. If we could, Mayor, with your blessing, move back to that workshop type format to get a little additional information with that working template he had.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lee, then my question would be, it seems a couple of us had suggested that there might be support with an increase in the base fee and a modification to the per employee amount. I'd be curious to see roughly what it would take to get us to the amount listed. It was option A that was originally moved?
If I may, I don't have the cord to show it on the screen at the moment off this laptop, so we take a few minutes to set that up.
Yes.
But I think your question.
Because we would like to take a little break.
Since we're in workshop mode, we don't have to necessarily
That's
move
exactly
for
right.
that
We are in workshop
recess,
mode, so while you're getting that set up, Corbin, we'll take a little break here. So much for that one.
No, I think it's okay. What I was going to do is I worked out that 3 hours
come back to order.
Let's do this.
And Councilmember McConaughey, I think you had the floor when we dismissed.
We were in workshop mode, so
Oh, well, you had the floor in workshop mode. How's that?
sounds good. Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, could you go back to that? Just to be succinct and to the point, since it's already after 10, this is something that I could support. I turn it over to the rest of the council for conversation.
I can support that too.
Well, we're in workshop mode, so anybody can jump in and speak.
I need to see what it will do to individual businesses a little bit, because that, I don't know.
If you look at scenario D, that is the $155 base fee and $6 per employee. That's the impact on the different businesses. I would suggest, that would probably hit the cap for the hospital, but.
Obviously, that'd be 2,000, right?
Correct, yeah. Whatever you adopt.
So one thing I see here is this totally changes how theaters are. I mean, the theaters were at 2,000, the other scenarios, and now it's at 275. But are the theaters one of those areas that we're having issues at? Or does it matter?
It doesn't.
The thing is, theaters aren't standalone. There are other businesses around them, so they draw a lot of folks. And I mean, I'm flashing back to an officer-involved incident that we had right near the theater, but it was at Jordan Landing when somebody pulled out a piece of pipe that was meant to look like a gun and had a laser on it. I mean, it wasn't at the theater, but there's all the businesses surrounding the theater, and they're all related.
Keep in mind that the theater is currently at 139, so this still, doubles, pretty close, doubles their fee.
Does increasing the per employee fee discourage someone hiring more employees?
By $3 a year? If I can't hire somebody because it costs me $3 a year more, then my business is in bigger trouble than.
I think scenario D is $6.
But it's a difference
Right,
between
it's
the
currently-
$3 right now and the
It's
$6
currently
proposed.
going to $6. If it costs me $3 a year more to hire somebody, I got bigger expenses than that.
Well, Boeing, it costs a lot more.
But Boeing pays their employees more than $3 an hour too.
Right, but they can build that, they can take $3 a year out of their salary, out of each individual salary. I mean, what's that, 0.0006 cents per hour or something like that?
The thing for me, I had struggled with, back on December 12th, I had agreed with Councilmember McConaughey on the per employee. Between then and now, I'm comfortable with the per employee fee because we have businesses and employees that are driving, many from other cities into our city, that probably get involved in accidents or what have you that helps with that. There are other cities, Mill Creek is $6 per employee. Trying to think who the other one is that's 6. I think it's Taylorsville. West Valley is 10 per employee. So I think it's in line with that. The base fee is a little higher than some of the competing cities. I think Sandy's 140, West Valley's 110, Murray's 100. It's in the ballpark, yeah, and that's an annual fee, so I can't see it being excessive. I still am of the opinion, maybe it comes at a later time. I still am very favorable to what West Valley and Murray have done, where they have limited categories that actually have a direct impact on police service. So I'm comfortable with this, but I still would like to explore places, that like the other cities have done, which is places that serve alcohol, sexually oriented businesses. I have to go get my list of businesses to look at. But so kind of what I would think is that we look at scenario D with the cap of 2,000, and that we revisit this as we're getting ready for next year's budget cycle. It gives the staff some time to look at what other cities are doing on specific categories that have a direct impact on police services.
Corbin, can I get Corbin to do one more thing? Will you change the 6 to 7 for me? Yeah, the bottom line didn't change.
Sorry, give me 1 second, because the budget impact's not tied to this sheet. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
So there you see, if it's 155 and 7, the budget impact's 193,000.
I'd rather have a bulletproof vest, but okay.
Were there any other follow-up comments before I jump
No,
in?
I'm done, thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at perfect versus palatable. With what Councilmember Anderson was saying, honestly, the disproportionate fee is an easier way to go. I don't like necessarily the idea of the per employee. I'd rather have all one or all the other. While financially it's not a significant difference to be charging the per employee amount, mentally I think there might be a little bit of a deterrent for hiring because, oh yeah, all I remember is I have to pay more per employee that I hire, even though it's not material. The amount is not material. That would be my preference, but where we're at right now, I'd also like to see fewer categories, or even if we keep the number of categories we have, change the disproportionate fee to many of them down to 0, and just the ones that are more substantial or have a larger impact have a percentage associated with them. That's what I think would be perfect. Given the comments about what may or may not happen in the legislative session, it probably makes sense to hold off. And again, going back to my comments earlier about the principle, everybody needs to go home safe. And I think it was 6 years ago, we made a commitment to work to increase the number of officers by just north of 30. And we're still working towards that. And this helps us get there. So even though this is not perfect, this would be palatable to me with either the $5 or the $6 amount. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Can I ask I'm sorry, can I ask a question of Corbin and David? Does this, David Bricky, how many Davids do we have tonight?
Only 2.
Okay. Does this?
3.
3?
Naylor's Obel Bricky.
Okay. Does scenario D provide, with the 155 and 6, does that provide you and the police chief at least a baseline of what you want to do for adding some police officers to address some of the public safety in the city?
And to roughly get 3 officers, each officer is about $113,000 to start, to get training, get them uniform. So at scenario D with $7 an employee, that's $193,000 plus the money coming in from the Align building, that's $281,000. So we're still short for a 3rd police officer.
But we can get 2.
You could get 2, yes.
Okay.
Out of 172,000, we can get 2?
That's 113 an officer.
With that, plus a
You can't make them
Not
wear.
172, he's going to 190, when he's going with the $7 per person still. He didn't drop it down
gotcha.
to this.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Missed the second half of that equation.
But I might add that as a employer who has to pay a per employee fee for some associations they belong to, that has never been a deterrent to me when I joined that association. Because if I pay $6 per employee or $7 per employee, that's not a big deal for me. And if I had 100 employees, which I didn't ever have that many, or I did get up to 10, however, then I have enough in my budget that is such a small amount that I didn't even think about it. So I would be fine with the 6 or the 7. I like scenario D because it has the 0 disproportionate fee, and I would vote for that today.
So you would vote for the 7?
I would.
I could.
I just think it gets us farther to what our goal, at least what I perceive our goal is, which is safety of our city and getting more officers on the street.
Would you like to make that a motion I could second?
We're not in, we're
still in workshop mode.
right now.
We have to exit workshop mode.
I move that we abandon workshop mode?
You can't move in workshop
I
mode.
think Mr. Bricky wants to address
I
this.
do. The chief's been crunching numbers, and because now we're moving down the year, through the year, the numbers I was working with were for 6 months. He's looking at 5 months. If we could get to $356,732, that would actually pay for 5 officers.
Yeah, but these are annual numbers we're looking at. It's gonna raise $193 a year, not $193 every 6 months. 193,000, yeah, times by 1,000, sorry. Isn't that how all budgeting works in government? You times it by 1,000? You just add zeros.
So how much are we getting with line?
Sorry, let me turn that on. $78,488 a year.
And how much is it per officer per year?
It's roughly
$113,000.
$113,594.
That's just for the first year, correct? After that goes down?
I'm sorry, I can't understand you.
That's just for the first year, then it goes down after that, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm ready to go into make motion mode if you're ready to go into make motion mode.
Okay, I will close the workshop and return to the city council meeting. Councilmember Whitelock.
Okay, I would like to make a motion. I move that we, make sure I'm on the right one, yes. We pass ordinance 1901, amending and adopting the City of West Jordan business license fees as set forth in the new scenario D, which has a base fee of $155 and a per employee fee of $7
And a cap.
and a cap of $2,000.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Whitelock, a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Now discussion to the motion.
May I ask a clarifying question on the motion? Will you clarify in your motion too whether there's a phase-in period for any businesses that are hitting the cap?
Yes, I would like to include that we have a phase-in for those businesses highly impacted and nearing the cap, as per the proposal.
And the second?
My second still stands, and with that, my understanding of the second, as I'm reading ordinance 19-01, we have section 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Section 2 already includes the cap of 2,000. 3 includes the phase-in, and the question is with number 1, with section 1. So where it says the business license fees are hereby amended as adopted and presented in scenario blank, since this isn't really a scenario. My understanding of the motion is the business license and adopted as written, but basically saying the business license fees are hereby amended and adopted with the base fee at $155 per employee at 7, which is the same information said in the scenario. So everything else in that motion, section 2, 3, 4, 5 would still be exactly the same. Is that your intention?
Yes.
Okay. Does that help clarify? Awesome.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, my only question maybe for Brock is, under scenario A, last meeting, we had talked about the cap hitting 15 businesses out of the 1,600 or so. And I don't know if that would stay the same under scenario D or if that increases or decreases. And I don't know if you even have those numbers right now because we just kind of did this tonight. But
Corbin might have those numbers, but I believe that would the cap still be at the roughly 15 or 24 businesses?
How many businesses would hit the cap under scenario D if we have that information?
With a base fee of 155, and a per employee of 7, I don't know how many would hit the cap. I would propose that it's a pretty low number because the disproportionate was largely the thing that was driving businesses to hit the cap, not the per employee charge.
So you would assume, we could assume probably less than 15, but we don't know.
I would assume, but I don't know because this model doesn't plug in the employee counts for every employer in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I just have a
I'm ready to
question.
call for a vote.
I know. And I'll just ask the question, the vote. You know, I don't expect an answer right now, but I'm thinking that after we look at this further, we may be able to even remove that cap, because if that cap is just so small and it just affects half a dozen businesses, it may not even be necessary. But let's go ahead and pass this the way it is now, and we can change that later.
Okay, let's vote.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes, happily.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Surprisingly, aye.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Vote passes 7-0.
Okay, business item 11B, discussion and possible action regarding resolution 19-08, approving amendments to the following budgets for the general fund, special revenue funds, capital project funds, enterprise funds, and internal service funds for fiscal year 2018-2019. David Zobel.
Yes, Mayor. If you guys remember, we brought this up for a public hearing on December the 12th, and that was held, and now it's back for your consideration for passage. We have Eric Okerlund here, our budget officer, if you have specific questions of him, or if there's some specifics that have to do with a particular item in there, the directors would have further information than Eric does about those.
Questions for staff? Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to make a motion, but in my haste to hit the button, it's probably more appropriate for the person who sat on the committee to be offered the opportunity to make the motion first. So I'll release the floor.
Councilmember Jacob.
I actually had a question. Just double checking on this, these amendments, it says they're all funded by, sorry. They're not all the same. Revenues and reserves look the same to me on the motion at 9:30 at night, so I was mistaken. I'm sorry, 10:30 at night. I can tell time too. Sorry, I was mistaken.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Nobody lit up, and since only one of the items impacts CDBG, I can't say that. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve resolution 19-08.
Councilmember Anderson.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
No.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1.
Business item 11C, discussion and possible action regarding resolution 19-09, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Value Proposition Enterprises, DBA Big T Recreation, for the construction of the Wild West Playground in an amount not to exceed $800,000. Brian Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor. We're excited to bring this forward to you guys tonight for the approval of the contract for the construction of the Wild West Playground. I'm just going to give you a little background. Staff released a request for an RFP requesting interested contractors to provide design, construction, and installation service of the new playground. The RFP closed December 12th. There were two proposers that submitted all the required documentation. That was evaluated, and now we're in the process. We're here tonight to move that contract forward.
This is going to be a joint venture with Parks and Public Works. We'll be working together with the contractor, if approved, to have the project completed by mid-May of this year. Got staff here for any questions that you folks might have.
Questions for staff? Councilmember Burton.
Maybe now's, well, I'm going to ask it anyway. So as I looked at the different options, my favorite option is option 1. However, I don't think there are swing sets in option 1. So I would be in favor of option 1 with swing sets added to it.
This is the glory that we have with this contractor that we're trying to go under contract with is there's flexibility within the designs, and we've already discussed definitely having swing sets, large banks of swing sets in the design. So there will be swing sets out there for sure.
And is that going to affect the price? Of course, it will.
The other part of their presentation was those components can be moved around until we get into the options. That's when it starts affecting the price. But components in the 3 options, we can move those around as needed. And definitely, we were discussing swing sets in some of the options. So.
Okay. And the reason I liked option 1 is because it feels like it's a community. Instead of having bunch of little parks gathered around, it's all one big park that they can actually have a group or individuals could do that. But I think swing sets would be important to have, and then angle the benches so they face the playground. That would be my comments on there.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. So from my understanding, we're not picking design tonight, correct? We're just picking Big T and awarding them the contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is just to go under contract. You're
Okay.
only approving the contract.
Because I do agree, I want swings too, but I also, when I look at the options, it's still missing some incorporation of the old Wild West Jordan Playground. I don't see the water tower. I don't see maybe something that is similar to the Salt Palace. I don't know what it was. There was the Saltaire, yeah, that's Saltaire. So I would like to see those 2 things kind of put in this. So as far as options go, I'm not ready to say yes, pick this option, but I will say I will be in favor of picking Big T. Thank you.
They did save the water tower, and so it is coming back.
Just to touch on that, we do have the water tower that will be an iconic site of this playground, and then also there will be a public survey going out to gather public information, and we still have a final design period too. So we should be able to address a lot of your concerns.
In my experience with these is that you can move things around as long as you don't exceed the $800,000 number. So you can put different elements in, take elements out during the design phase, but as long as it doesn't exceed that. Councilmember Whitelock.
So, Dave, share with me what your vision is for how you're going to get input on these designs, these basic designs. What's the plan?
So up to this point, we did have open house that we invited residents to, and we did breakout sessions, and we wrote down all the public comment from them. And then moving forward, there will be an online survey that we'll put out through Kim Wells. And it'll mostly be gathering public input on the components that people desire so that we don't miss those components that rise up to the top when we do this final design.
So we won't include the renderings for them to look at to have a choice? Could we, maybe I'll rephrase that. Could we include renderings for them to, I would envision, because when you're looking at these 3, I think they're 3 different, and we've already heard that some of us have strong opinions on them. I would like to see the public be able to have a rendering that they're looking at, and then be able to have some choices of what you mentioned, like what's more important, swings or slides or this or that. I just think it would be a good idea, and we really need to get this right. The timeline to me is not nearly as important as getting it right. And I think the more input we allow the public to have, the more invested they'll feel, and the better it will go.
Mr. Bricky has a comment.
And to that end, I want to share, so you see first before the public does, the questionnaire that's going to be released to the public so they can fill it out. May I approach and just share it with you two?
You don't have to ask permission to approach. You can take the lawyer out of the law department. You can't take the law department out of the lawyer.
That's true.
I can't understand it. You don't have to ask permission to approach. It's not a correct analogy. You also don't have to get the podium. You can stay in your seat.
And the other thing I need to address at this point is from before I was up here, when I was down there, there's been 3 different times that we've had RFP issues related, and this is one of them. And I appreciate all the work staff does, and I know you're doing your best and you're doing what you feel is right. But ultimately, when people are disgruntled and not happy, they often come to the mayor or to my inbox. And so in my mind, we need to work on our process. So I'm hoping there's at least one other council member that will say yes, and that we can put this on a not too distant future agenda as an item to discuss the process for the RFP.
And I can address that they are working on that.
But I want us to be part of that process. I want us to give input on our visioning for it.
There's an electronic process that we have to buy the software for that is a part of that. BidSync is one of those, and this is not BidSync, but it's a similar process to BidSync.
And then my other thought will be that I think a council member should be part of the scoring team. And there's lots of ways that could be handled, but that's something I'd like. So in a future agenda item, and I've seen a couple of heads nod, so I like what I've read of this, but I still think some pictures, some art, the renderings, just like I've got here, because I actually am drawn to the John Deere personally, but when I think what I'm replacing, I don't think that should be the choice, because I'm trying to stay true to what we're replacing. And so I would really like public input as to, maybe they want to stay true to it. Maybe they want to do something totally different like the John Deere that I'm looking at. So I hope we can make that work.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciative of David handing out the survey. I'm just wondering if maybe there's a couple questions that deal with the all abilities. As you know, I have a special needs child, and it would be nice to be able to put things in there at an all abilities park. And on the drawings, one of the things that I see is some controlled access points, fencing, something along those lines. So that may be something to not wooden planks, not or vinyl, anything like that, but just something where you can sit down on a park bench and watch your special needs child play, knowing that they're not going to run off to Veridian or run off to City Hall or run off those ways. So those would be some things that on the survey I think would be valuable to have, and I think the Big T Recreation could maybe look at that as we talk to the residents. I think that's critical that we talk to the residents. I too would like to still honor those that volunteered so much time in building the Wild West Jordan Park to have some semblance of a Wild West. I don't know how to do that, but I leave that to the professionals. But I think as we talk, we can honor all the many volunteers that put sweat and money into that playground that's been loved to death, and honor their work for a very long time with this new park. And I do like the John Deere tractor, by the way. But I do think we need to have just a lot of resident involvement and have them have some ownership in how it looks, and not necessarily just the 7 of us. So that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. I'm thinking back to Mr. Anderson's comments earlier this evening about shopping local, and I would really like to be able to make it to a Paula Burger to shop there before they close at 11. So I'll try and be quick. With the survey and the questions out here, I like them. They're pretty straightforward. I would, if we're focusing on making an all abilities playground, I would suggest perhaps adding a question along the lines of, do you have a child or family member who requires an all abilities amenities? Because that's going to make a very big difference. I know Mr. Naylor and I had conversations earlier about fencing around the park to control, and the comment was that, well, as we've asked the public, half of them seem for it, half of them seem against it. Some of them want it wide open, but the ones that want it wide open, I'm guessing haven't had to work with kids who have special needs. So the other thing that I think that question would be helpful as we try and weigh some of these amenities. I would like the council to still be very much involved as we make the final decisions. I would like it to be a council decision as to what final amenities go in. And I think it would make it easier for staff if that was discussed at strategic planning. I guess my question for Mr. Naylor would be, do you think by the 25th we have time to get feedback from residents that could be incorporated into meaningful conversation that results in actual decisions that can be made at that strategic planning meeting here in a couple weeks?
So, according to our schedule that we've set forth, if we stay on schedule, we're hoping to have final designs decisions by the 23rd, which would meet that 25th deadline for strategic planning.
Okay. And what do you mean by final decisions?
So final design. So we'll be working with the contractor for that final design. So we'd be able to present that at strategic planning.
It would not be final, let me tell you that.
Final proposal?
So
council can still make adjustments if we feel.
Very good point. We could come to you based off of public comment and the final design that we had got with the vendor and present it to you. And if you've seen alterations, then we would have to go back to a final design.
Okay, so final draft before finalized. Those were the big things. There's a lot I'd like to say about the park in particular, but the agenda item is specifically the contract. I don't have any issues with the contract, so I'll cede the floor to Councilmember Jacob.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, none of these designs have nearly enough places for teenagers to hide and conduct nefarious activities. I'm very disappointed. But besides that, question 4 on here I think addresses a lot of the things that have been discussed on this survey that they just handed out. Note that West Jordan instills all ability playgrounds at its regional parks. I didn't know that was a policy, but that's kind of cool. And on there, rank and order preference, slides, motion elements, wheelchair or other mobility access, sensory panels. It's all about special needs, or not all about, but all ability. It's kind of all in that question. So I think that addresses a lot of it. But what I don't see in here, please rank the following playground elements in the order in which you or a member of your family would use them. During that open house that I attended, and we had the breakout sessions, and also during the few posts that have been on social media, both on the city website and on other individuals and neighborhood websites, one thing that I've heard mentioned more than any other individual element is water things, splash pad, water features, some kind of water attraction, not on here. I have heard that more than anything else. I know it may not be fiscally feasible, but if it's in here and it gets high responses, maybe the developer could surprise us and figure out a way to put it in there in a cost-effective manner. So just something to think about. I've heard more about that than I have about anything else.
Aren't we the developer?
More than swings. Well, no, Big T Construction.
Oh, they're the contractor.
Whoever it is. The contractor, that's what I meant. You know, the person who's doing the work. So just wanted to put that out there because that's what I've heard more than anything else feedback-wise on this playground is, how about water?
The splash pad that we did out there was a couple $1 million. Councilmember Lamb.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to adopt resolution number 1909-09, authorizing the mayor to approve a contract with Value Proposition Enterprises DBA Big T Recreation to furnish, deliver, and install new playground equipment for the Wild West Playground Reconstruction Project in an amount not to exceed $800,000.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Second with comment.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. You said you have a comment to the motion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor.
Discussion to the motion, including your comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Jacob about the splash pad. I think that would be an item that we want to also include, probably not so much as strategic planning, but during the budgeting process to see if we can get that on the radar and find a way to time that and identify funding for it. Obviously, we don't have enough funding right now, but there are some additional sources that we've discussed in the past, and there might be some options. So I would suggest that we don't rule splash pad out. We design the park with the intention of a splash pad being adjacent to it at some point in the not too distant future, and discuss some of those options at strategic planning when we discuss the park amenities.
You got that for the agenda then? Okay.
He didn't listen. He's just
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Another suggestion I want to throw out. Where the zip line is, under the zip line, if you have a low spot, so we can have a big puddle, kids would love a big puddle there. We didn't have to.
Let's just put the water park.
Let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
and Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Vote passes 7-0.
This is item 11E, discussion and possible action regarding resolution 19-11, confirming the appointment of a council member to serve as mayor pro tem. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move to nominate, well, instead of nomination and motion, I would move to approve Resolution 19-11, appointing Councilmember Lamb as Mayor Pro Tem for 2019.
Councilmember Jacob.
Sorry, I had to comment over.
Opposed, Councilmember Whitelock.
I just want to express my desire to be Mayor Pro Tem.
In that case, I'll nominate Councilmember Whitelock.
There's a motion on the table.
Oh, there's a motion, you're right, we can't.
Councilmember Anderson.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion, Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. What I would like to see in this process is this has gotten a little bit politicized, and I would like to see us set up like just a rotating policy that makes sense, and I don't know exactly what that would be, but considering usually, except for the next 2 years, usually we all serve 4-year terms, and there'll be, of course, this is going forward, this is gonna change with the chair and vice
6 years,
chair.
there's a lot of 2-year terms.
Well, in the past 50 years, there's only been 4-year terms until right now.
Now, there'll be a lot of 2-year terms.
I know, this is the last mayor pro tem, which makes this whole discussion moot. But what I wanted to see was everybody get a chance. And let it rotate through, and everybody gets a chance, because 4 of us get elected at once. There's 4 years that we're gonna be here. You know what I mean? It makes sense to have it be shared and have everybody get a turn. I'd say Councilmember Burton and I, this may be our last hurrah at this. It may not. So Councilmember Lamb, Councilmember Whitelock both have at least 2 more years at this. Just throwing that out there. I'm not campaigning for it per se. I'm just saying that I would just like to see it have been a less, I don't want to say politicized, because I don't even know if that's the right word, but a less weird process.
Councilmember Anderson.
I appreciate the nominees and the comments that my seatmate has presented, and there's some philosophies that I have that are my own. Number one, this would be the last mayor pro tem under this form of government, and I do see some. We have chairs and vice chairs, but I do see some synergy on even 2-year terms for mayor pro tem. You know, if we weren't changing the form of government, but even considering that a 2-year term for chair and vice chair under the new form of government. Not that I disagree that everybody should have a term, and I don't think it's necessarily politicizing, because one of my philosophies is the 4 seats, District 1, 2, 3, and myself, are open this next year. Some have stated publicly that they're intending to run. So to keep the politics out of it, as I mentioned last year or 2 years ago, I have some hesitation on someone who is potentially running being mayor pro tem, because I do think it could be politicized. So that's just a philosophy that I have. I do think that having a 2-year term helps bring some stability, some institutional knowledge on the dais, but that also means that not everybody would get a turn to be chair and vice chair under the new form of government. So for me, to not politicize it, I could only support either Councilmember Lamb or Councilmember Whitelock. And I know that the system isn't perfect. I get that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I seconded it for discussion because I think either Councilmember Lamb or Councilmember Whitelock would do a wonderful job as Mayor Pro Tem. Some of the questions that I would have for both of you is time availability. As I served as Mayor Pro Tem this last year, I think I stepped into the mayor's seat twice. I think it was. Came in, signed some papers. I served as Meet the Mayor, and I did change the sign. Your sign, I hand wrote Mayor Pro Tem, crossed your name out, and had a little fun with it. So I don't know. I don't know if you both work or have commitments. I know Chad works. I don't know all that Kayleen does. I know you do a ton. You're all over. But I would be interested to know your availability. I'm not worried so much about filling in when the mayor's not here, because that's at night typically. But if the mayor were out of town and you needed, and staff called you to come in to sign some contracts or to do some mayoral duties, because if the mayor is out of town or on vacation or visiting grandkids, the mayor pro tem is the acting mayor. And so I'd be interested in hearing from both of you briefly, since we're going to be really tight to get to Apollo Burger.
In and out's all the time.
So just real quick, your availability, those kind of things, that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
You want me to go first?
So why don't you go first?
Well, as far as availability goes, my office is 10 minutes from here. And if I know in advance that I can break away, I just can't leave within 10 minutes and go, see, I got to go to West Jordan City. So I don't think availability is going to be an issue with me. I think all of you know I missed half of a council meeting this past year. So as far as being here, I'm always going to be here. I might be a week where I'm on vacation. But I do appreciate the nomination, and I would be willing to serve. And I think, Zach brought up the politicization of this. I don't want it to be that way. I'm not running for mayor pro tem. But if someone nominates me and you guys vote for me, I will serve to 100% of my ability and do the best I can.
And I would say I'm self-employed, and that's fancy for I take care of my grandchildren during the week. On the weekend, I have another side job that I do. So I can make myself available whenever I want to, because I also have a sister, a niece, and 2 neighbors that are my backup daycare, that I pay them to watch my grandkids when I can't. So I'm available pretty much anytime.
So we have a motion on the table, so let's vote on that motion.
Councilmember Whitelock?
No.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob?
Sure.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1.
Item 12, remarks and communications. So we'll start with communications with our city manager.
And this evening.
Thank you. Any communications from council members? Councilmember Anderson.
The only thing I have is to follow up. I didn't want to do it necessarily during the Wild West playground discussion, but Councilmember Whitelock brought up the RFP process, and as I understand the RFP process is we don't open we as the council, we don't really do anything with it. But the staff doesn't open the RFPs until after the closing, so there really isn't a way to validate if everything is included. And I kind of compared it to a job opening. If I'm making an application online with software, typically it won't let me hit submit unless I've attached a resume and I've attached cover letters or attached references, some of those kind of things. And so I would be interested to see if we can enhance the RFP process to help vendors submit properly, because I think we would get some good qualified bids on a variety of different topics. I don't know if we can have a council member on the RFP committee because we're a legislative body, so I don't know how that applies. I'd like to kind of find that out. But the mayor talked a little bit about software, but I do agree with Kayleen, and I would be the second council member to mention that I do think that we need to improve our RFP processes. Just the two, let's see, so 26 months that I've been on the council, at least 3 of the RFPs have either had to be canceled, redone. We're not very clean on that, and I think we deserve to be clean. I believe our vendors should be. So I would support Councilmember Whitelock in addressing future RFP processes and just work on those.
Corbin has a comment on that.
If I may, that is something we are very actively working toward, improving that process. We had a meeting today with the staff who are stakeholders most involved in that, in terms of the process where vendors can't submit if their packet is in any way incomplete. That is one of the things we are looking at, as the mayor mentioned, through software. It's a process that the state uses that we would piggyback onto the state system if we were to go this route. And we believe one of the features is that vendors can't submit if they haven't included the
required,
insurance requirements or the disclosure forms or whatever. Yeah, whatever we require.
Okay.
So hopefully, the issue, like what we had with this RFP, would not happen.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other thing is more global. I've not really ever spoken at remarks, and I know that we're trying to get to Apollo Burger. But I just really think, and I'm going to put this on the strategic plan agenda. I think we can really improve in public input and business input. The biggest wake-up call for me personally was when we did the survey of the residents on the solid waste fees, and we got a very good pulse. I wish we had done that prior to putting the RFP together, and also with business input. I'm looking forward to seeing how that will work with the new arrangement that we have. But I think we make better decisions up here on the dais when we have a multitude of public input and a multitude of business input. And so those are just my remarks. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments tonight were for, one, welcome Chief Maxfield, and way to sit through the whole marathon meeting, even though it's not by any stretch the longest we've had recently. It's not even 11, guys, come on. So welcome. Look forward to your contributions to the city. I think we're just about wrapping up our department head turnover, so we had all of our department heads at once, kind of all go at once, and not all of them, but some of them, and then we had, anyway, we're stabilizing, and I like to see that. That's great. Also, I wanted to mention to Chief Wallenstein that we appreciate you. Today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and I saw a post early this morning that said wear blue. So I wore blue and even a flag tie because I didn't have a blue tie that's all blue. So I wore blue today for National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, so I wanted to let you know that as we discuss your budget and all the budgets and the needs of our city as it comes to policing and the things that that we need as a city and that we expect from you and your department, I want you to know that you're appreciated and that I shudder to think of what it might otherwise be like. So, thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Amen to Zach. And then we had a gentleman come last week, Mr. Naylor, and he asked about he stated the condition of Veterans Memorial Park, where the monument is to the veterans, that it's kind of getting a little bit in disrepair. So I don't know where that's at, but I'd sure like to have some feedback come back to let us know, do we think there's something that needs to be done? And if so, what the plan is? Because I don't like it when citizens come and tell us things and we say nothing to them and then nothing happens, so.
Just to give you a little information, the monument area hasn't had, any kind of significant infrastructure upgrades since it was complete. So he is correct that it does need some love. We've submitted some green sheets in the past to try to address some of those issues. Haven't quite caught any traction on getting those approved. So I will continue to work on trying to get funding for that project. So
thank you.
Councilmember Lamb. You're next.
Oh, I have no remarks, thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two comments. The first one is, when we made the decision to do the public hearing in one meeting and then make a discussion on it in the second meeting, we agreed to do that as a trial until the end of the year. So since the year ended, this meeting, we should have done this all in one. And I think today was a good example with the project with the storage units, that we could have done that all in one meeting. So I would propose that we leave that flexible, that we can select when we schedule those public hearings, whether it's something that just be done once, where they come in and just want, fees for service to stay at use the park. Those could be done in a single meeting. But if there's some that have more involvement, we want to have all that, then have some time to research and then do it the next meeting, so that we don't have a carte blanche on there. We select when we schedule for a public hearing.
And I'm going to refer to David or Rob. We probably need to put a resolution back in 2 weeks to address that. Is that correct?
Yeah, at least put it on as an agenda item.
Yes. Okay.
To decide which way you want to go, and then we can write up whatever amendment to the policy, your policies or whatever, depending on your decision.
Right, so until we do that, we're back to where we were prior, because
What did the original resolution
it
say?
said until the end of the year.
Till the end of the year.
Probably, if that's what the resolution said.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate consistency. I don't want to be a yo-yo, going 1 week we're going to do something different than we're going to do the next week. So we're either going to go in or out.
Well, I think we ought to select which types need the extra time and which don't, because I think that many of them don't, and we're just delayed making.
I think it's
people come back
consistency,
to us.
though, that is important.
Okay.
David, you had a comment? Okay. Anything else?
Yes, the other item is, yesterday, it was Tuesday, so yesterday, I was on the Chamber of Commerce had, I can still say that now I can't. The Chamber of Commerce had a government actions meeting, which I participated in, and in that meeting, there were some businesses who wanted to address the water fees. So I said I would put a meeting together where the businesses can come and talk with the city about what we did and if there's anything we can do to make adjustments to understand their needs and our needs, to make sure we fulfill our needs and we find a way that they can survive through that. So they were game for that, and I set an appointment up for January 17th. And I've talked to a couple of the council members already to invite them to come, and I talked to Dave Bricky to see if he'd be willing to have some staff come. But before we do that, it would be better if the council was okay with Dave Bricky coming himself or sending some staff to meet with that and do that. So I want to see if there's any council members who are opposed to me holding this meeting and having some staff there, that we can follow up on this with the businesses in West Jordan.
I'm opposed to it because I don't see if there's a point to it. We've passed the resolution that changed the water rates, and it's not going to make any difference at all. It'll just make people more angry because they will say, you didn't listen to us. Well, we did listen to you. We listened to all these people, and we still made the decision we needed to make on the council. So I don't see a point in trying to visit with those people. What is it going to gain? They'll be able to express their feelings, but end of the day, nothing's going to change.
What we could gain, in my opinion, is they could understand the city's perspective better if we sit down and talk with them. What I talked about earlier, the signed ordinance, how the city had passed that without having good communication with the businesses. Then they brought the businesses in, had communication and made some adjustments, and then went on. Both the city and the businesses were happy afterwards. That's what we can gain. If we
Well,
work
I'm opposed to
together-
it, and I would not recommend it.
Okay, and that's all I have. How, anybody else opposed in addition to the mayor?
Thank you. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable because that will be, only 3 will be there. And it makes me uncomfortable. It's what we need to get to, right? We need to start doing this beforehand. But at this point, it makes me uncomfortable.
I kind of like the idea for whoever goes, because I think we're not going to change anything that's already been changed, but it can give us a process going forward. How would you have liked to have seen this done? Give us some input so that going forward, when these kind of decisions come up, we can have a better idea of what kind of forum the people who attend that meeting would have liked to have seen and would like to see for the next time. So
Then how about it be something like, you'd call it a study session? And you invite, you can invite who you want, but then anyone is allowed to come and we're all able to be there and hear the dialogue. In that format, I could go with it, but with just 3 council members and some select business, that makes me uneasy. So if we did it like a work session, study session, I could then support something like that.
Well, the city manager will take direction from the council. He will take that direction from us. And I'm wondering, is a resolution required, city attorney, before we can allow something like this to move forward, or can we just give direction?
No, you can just, you don't need a resolution, but I would suggest you take a verbal vote.
That's what we'll do then, and I guess I will start by saying no, and we'll start down with.
Well, I have a comment, not a.
I am opposed to having our city manager go to this meeting, so I say no, he does not go. Councilmember, we'll just go right down the.
Well, I'm not ready to vote, Mayor. I have a comment and a question for some clarification, if I may ask that.
Or you can ask it when it gets to you, I guess, huh?
Is it to me or who's
I was
next?
going to go to Councilmember Whitelock.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on. I'm just voting on that Councilmember Burton wants to have a meeting with some people.
No.
And bring in
You're
David.
voting whether or not David Bricky is going to go to that meeting.
But it's the meeting just with a few council members and having David Bricky come, correct?
I don't know what
Then-
council members are going to go to.
Then my vote is no.
yes.
Okay, Ellen, you're up.
Am I voting or can I ask a question?
You can ask a question.
Okay. So, Rob, in light of tonight, so the meeting, if I read the email correct, Councilmember Burton, is West Jordan Chamber of Commerce representatives, select businesses, I'm assuming Dannon or somebody, is it just Dannon or is it additional? Okay. And in light of, we approved the water rates last meeting, and with the change with Chamber of Commerce services, does that put us in any, are there any ramifications of doing this? I guess is the question I would have.
There's no legal problem with it. When David let me know this happened, I suggested to him that to be consistent with his fiduciary duty to you as a council, he works based upon majority vote of you hiring him. When you have spoken as a body, he needs to be careful to not engage in anything that might either actually or unintentionally undermine the decisions you've made, because he's responsible for carrying out your decisions. So I suggested to him that he get direction from at least 4 of you to attend, simply because the vote has been taken. And you don't want to put him in the position of feeling like who is he balanced? Is he saying the right things, or is he doing what you want him to do? But in terms of a legal problem, I can't think of anything that would be problematic that way.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a second question then. I'm aware of Dannon's concern with the water rate increase that this council adopted. And we tonight placed a $2,000 cap on business license fees. Our stormwater fees also have it's not really a cap, well, I guess it is, it's 20 acres, is that right, Justin? We have a 20-acre cap on large businesses, and I know it's not part of the RAFTLA study. Dannon's water use is approximately 3.2% of the city's entire usage. Is there a way to phase in a water user who consumes greater than 10 million gallons a month administratively?
Let me answer that a little more broadly. I think if you are interested in discussing the application of what you decided to specific businesses, that's probably a conversation that we ought to have offline, so that I can legally understand more what you're talking about, and the city manager can talk to you a little more about the implementation of that and how it would happen. To answer your question carte blanche, I don't want to give an answer because I don't know exactly what you're talking about and what the timing would be.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't mean to dodge the question, but I don't have a good answer because I don't know enough about what it is we're contemplating.
I'll talk to you offline, and so until I get that answered, I'm going to just say no for right now. But I could change. But I would like to explore that. So that's where I'm at this moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb?
Can I ask, where's this invitation for this meeting? Did I get it? I don't remember seeing it.
You did not because you didn't. Go ahead. You did not because I stopped after 3 members. So once I got 3 members, I stopped asking others.
So my thoughts are this is an issue between businesses in West Jordan, and while I understand what the chamber's doing, we can identify which businesses will have questions without having the chamber do this for us. So I'll be voting no on having us be there.
Councilmember Burton?
Oh, yes, of course. And I asked the chamber to invite other members. Those that agreed to come that were in the meeting were Waste Management and Dannon, and they were going to find others. Yes, but I was thinking it would save me some work if they did the work.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Thank you, Mayor. My concern is more perception. I mean, even just yesterday, was it Monday or Tuesday, listening to the radio, KSL seemed to think that a town hall meeting was an official city meeting where a decision was going to be made about significant incentives to PayPal, and it wasn't understood, or with their first couple go-arounds, that no, this is not a formal official city meeting. If we have our city manager there in capacity as city manager, it could very quickly be seen to be a city meeting where policy questions may come up, and that part makes me a little bit nervous. I would like to see that part fixed. to be supportive. I think it would be good to have a city meeting. Again, timing after the fact is a little bit problematic. So I'm in favor of the concept, but that's the loose end I'd want to see tied up first.
Thank you. So it appears like you do not have to go to that meeting. There are 5 that said no. So with that, item 13, oh, sorry, Chris, I almost passed you up. Go ahead. You're up.
Well, seeing as we missed Apollo Burger's close, I'm going to go ahead with all 25 of my items. First.
That's why I skipped
Okay,
over
we'll
you.
do 18 items then. RFP, I share the same concerns. We had brought this up before as a city council, and we had given direction to our city manager, Mr. Rick Davis, to work with Mr. Rigby in Public Works to get the problem fixed. And he was working with Mr. Was it Joe Hall? And obviously we never got there. There are some softwares that we've used previously, which I'm glad to hear that's already going down. Additionally, I think it might be worth reviewing our process to see if somebody administratively could be involved in the process just to confirm completeness as a courtesy. Nothing binding on those who are bidding, meaning if we miss something, if the person looking for completeness misses something, well, that's not on us, it's still on them. But as a courtesy, to review the packets if they submit well in advance, just so we can confirm and try and eliminate some of the problems that we've seen. That alone would help us a couple of times. As far as the scoring committee, that's a conversation that we should have as a council. Depending on who you talk to on staff, some members of staff will say, well, that's a conflict of interest to be making a recommendation to the body on which you sit where you're going to vote. However, as a council member, there are times where we've given direction to go do something or procure something, and there's been a gap in understanding. And when we ask them to go find something that should cost $50 a month, so $300 a year, staff has come back with a proposal that's over $20,000 a year because there hasn't been the council connection. It's a conversation we need to have. It's been done in the past. I think it would be beneficial, but there are some safeties that I think would be worthwhile. Next up, the water rates. Unfortunately, with time constraints, I was not able to be here when the decision was made in the last meeting. It was slightly frustrating because this is something that you all know I've been very passionate about. I poured a lot of time into, and the order of items was changed. So although the initial schedule would have allowed, the initial agenda would have allowed me to be present for that, it was switched, so I didn't have a chance to share my thoughts at the end when a decision was made. For the record, I would have voted in opposition. I think the decision that was made compounds the problem. While I recognize a need to move forward and take action relatively quickly, I would have, had I been there, I would have suggested that we also take steps and direct the vendor to put into place a plan so that we can move for the pay for usage, because I really do feel, and even their own reports suggested, that we're not on a pay for use program. It's some users are subsidizing others, and that's something that I don't feel is appropriate. So I just wanted to voice my discontent with the process and with the end vote. And I will still be bringing this up when it comes time for the water rate discussions that we'll probably have in just a few months to see if we can't get on a course that will eventually get us there. Next item I had, speaking of water and the kind of the conversations that we've had with some of the businesses lately, I did hear from a local business with some concerns. I'll just jump right to the point. Taffy Town brought up the idea that they would like an economic development equivalent of a neighborhood watch, like a little small working group that can make recommendations for what's needed out in the business center. Their needs in that industrial park are different from the needs of folks in other areas. Their suggestion was maybe if there was a small working group of just maybe a dozen or two businesses out here that could focus on our needs, it might get more traction. So I wanted to bring that up with Mr. Anderson. Maybe that could be brought back as something perhaps the new chamber could do, perhaps something he could do. But it sounded like a really good idea because there are unique needs for industrial parks or manufacturing areas that are not chamber-wide or city-wide. I wanted to share that with the council. I wanted to share my impressions of how this meeting worked tonight with the work session. Obviously, there's some bugs to work out, but I think it went well. Thank you for pushing to get us to a format where we can do this. I like having all in one meeting rather than broken out. I did like having it all in one place. And I was really impressed that as a group, we took something that was as divisive and ongoing as a business license fees, and we found something that we unanimously agreed upon. I thought that was incredibly impressive. The last thing I wanted to bring up, if anyone drives by my home for the next few weeks, or for the next few days, my Christmas lights are still up. They're the fun little programmable lights. But I just have one solid strand up, and it is just a thin blue line on the rain gutter. I pray we never experience again in our city what Provo experienced in theirs. Chief Wallenstein, thank you so much for coming here as our police chief and helping us make the decisions necessary to keep our officers and our citizens safe. If there is anything at all that we can do to support if there's anything we can do to support Provo or the officers in Provo who are brothers and sisters of the officers here, I'm sure you have the full support of the council to do anything we can to support them. I'm appreciative of the letter that went out to share our condolences with them. And please pass on our sincere thanks for everything that our officers do for us here. It's a difficult time and a very sad scenario, but we're thoughtful of them and very much appreciate what they do. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Corbin, do we still want to go into the closed session tonight?
Yes, we have a number of items we want to discuss with you.
Okay, then we will move to 13, closed session, which is for the discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, or strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation, or strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, including any form of a water right or water shares, and adjourn from there.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second.
Second with comment.
Discussion to the motion.
Could it be convened in and out?
We need a vote.
It's within the city.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Yes to in and out. Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
Sure.
7-0.
Their fries suck.